Hi, I'm JJ Galetto, and I chose the assignment for the depiction of women in Disney films. And I chose this assignment because it really reminded me about the readings that we did in class with the whole people accusing women of being witches and how they were viewed and looked at, how unfair it was. And when I look at Disney films, I feel the same exact way. We see really early on with the earlier films like Cinderella, Snow White, and a Princess Aurora, how they need a Prince Charming to come and save them. And they wait there, and even though they're in trouble, they can do nothing about it. They wait there until they are saved. And we see later in the films, in the Disney films, how they're more heroic, how their roles have definitely changed. Um, Disney has done better with changing the roles that women do play, but we cannot ignore the fact that how they were viewed beforehand when they were first being created. Um, just like in the PowerPoint, I explained the changings of over time, how they evolved, where each film ended with a princess having their happily ever after by finding their Prince Charming and being able to ride off into the sunset to the new castle that they now get to live in. Whereas, where we look at the newer films, where Mulan is not necessarily a Disney princess, but she is a female, saves all of China from the Huns, and how Moana saves her whole village by returning the Stone of Life, and so on and so forth. We see a definitely different image, a more in the newer films, a more independent, strong woman. When we look at Princess and the Frog, Tiana, we see even a different culture, a different a race. She's an African American who becomes a princess. We see a difference in that too from the beginning, where it was more typically Caucasian women. Now in the newer films, we see different race. So, like I mentioned, Mulan, Chinese, Princess Tiana, African American, Moana, she's Islander. We see also a more realistic look in the princesses now. When we look at Moana, we see a more average looking body than when you look at Cinderella, who's a twig. Um, we give girls a more better image to look up to and to see back in now than we did back in the older films. When we look at the older films, we see, the princesses just cleaning, cooking, doing the household chores that women are supposed to do as like a housewife, where they need to do that in order to find a man, as now where it's not necessarily about finding a man, it's a whole different story and plot. It all started around when Ariel came out. Ariel was the first princess to really be rebellious, to really not want to, she knew what she wanted and she was going to get it, basically. And from there, it evolved over time. Again, like where we see Mulan, where she was, she showed that women are just as important as men and is just as powerful as men. And we see also Belle, who is the smartest girl in town. She is the only one that knows how to read. Um, like I said, their roles were changing, which is what we want to see. So we did see how women were depicted in the earlier films, but it definitely has changed over time. When we go back to love interest, like noted in my PowerPoint, love is very different than it was in the beginning of the Disney films. In the beginning of the Disney films, it was all about finding the one to have your happily ever after moment. Find the prince to marry and you can live in the castle. And that was pretty much the ending of them riding off into the sunset, like mentioned before. Where now it's totally different. We find in Frozen with Elsa and Anna that a sister's bond is just as important of love as finding your spouse, your Prince Charming. And we see in Moana, her love for her community is what makes her drive in order to save and find the Stone of Life and return it to the goddess in her film. So again, Mulan, her love for her family, her honor, she wants to help her father, is what helps her and drives her to become have her special title in her movie Mulan. We see that the difference in women have really been depicted in a new light than before. Before it was a negative light, not necessarily truly horrible, but it was definitely not a light that most women would want to see themselves in. Um, you know, we want to grow our children up to be strong, independent women. A lot of feminist groups were getting upset with a lot of these, with Disney and their storylines. And I think that one thing that Disney is really trying to do is understand what society wants and what society needs. They don't need a princess, a damsel in distress waiting for a prince to come save them. People are over that. You don't women just don't sit around anymore waiting for someone to come save them. No, they could do it their own selves. That, like, in the newer movies that just came out with Disney princesses. We definitely see, like I mentioned, a very big difference from the depiction of women in the beginning to the end. That is my project. Thank you very much.